as part of your studies. Very few. And the problem right now is that the enforcement mechanisms don't really help universally, and they're very spotty. So very quickly, the professional codes tend to talk about, are you doing harm in a general or specific way with the acts that you're doing? Are you making a product that potentially is going to fail? They talk about honesty. Are you giving credit to people when credit's due? Are you honoring confidentiality agreements and things like that? And they do focus on privacy because historically that's been the main thing. Privacy of personal information, not necessarily integrity or availability of systems. The academic codes, there are 3 parts to this. Respect for persons. People should be able to make decisions about whether they're involved or not. They should be able to opt out. You should be maximizing benefit. You should be minimizing harm and showing how you're balancing these. And when you're deciding who's going to benefit from your research, the benefit should go to the widest population possible. It shouldn't go to specific groups. And for selection of subjects, you shouldn't specifically choose prisoners because prisoners are available. You shouldn't specifically choose undergraduates because you're going to give them credit. Ken Hima and I were looking at just sort of some general codes of ethics in self-defense kinds of situations. Can you show who you're protecting, how you're protecting them? Can you show that the choice that you're making is the only choice? Are there other options that you could take that have less risk that might get the same benefit? There are 2 main things that tend to be sort of universal. We tend to give governments the right to enforce laws and punish people. We don't do that as citizens. And we don't go out and punish people, get retribution for something. That's something that the state's responsible for. And then the final thing that Ken was pointing out is the evidentiary principle means you've gone through all of these principles and you've shown adequate reason that they're all being met. Markham, I forget her first name, has spoken about your research methods should sort of derive from your ethics, and your ethics should be exhibited, everybody should see them. So if you look at why you're doing the research, what is your intent, who is being served, who are the stakeholders that you're primarily trying to serve, and then how would they feel about what it is that you're doing. There have been a number of studies of observation of people in public places, and they're public. People know that they're being observed by others, but if you do a study where you're monitoring them with video and they don't know it, they tend to be really uncomfortable about that. So even though they may think, well, this is not really a private place, certain methods that you use may make them feel uncomfortable. So certain things that we may do with botnet research may have some implications. If you look at the roles and responsibilities of the people who are doing things, there are other questions that come up regarding society. Should academic researchers be involved in manipulating criminal botnets? Do they have that responsibility to clean up? Should things be, well, so one of the things that I'm trying to put forward is some of the problems that we can solve, or some of the problems that we're trying to solve regarding the malicious activity could perhaps be done better if you take an operational focus as the primary focus and then do research within that environment rather than trying to have researchers claim an exemption to the Wiretap Act to be able to go out and monitor traffic and come up with some theory that they then turn around and generalize and make the public have access to that way. And there may be some circumstances for some of the things that we're doing that are at the extreme end of aggressiveness that may require the same kind of protections that we require for people studying biotoxins or nuclear materials. There are certain requirements for facility standards, for training of the people. You can't just go out and order certain kinds of like ricin or anthrax and study it in your home lab. You can do the same kind of thing with computer security. So hopefully I am coming close on time here. We all know that things are getting pretty dicey out there. There are lots of stories about things that are making a lot of people scared. And when we start talking about ethics, there is often a lot of resistance. This is going to make my job harder. It's going to potentially shut down certain kinds of research. If we do a good enough job of explaining how we're doing things, why we're doing things, and get buy-in from the general public, there may not be as many of these impediments. And if we're going to try and do this through self-regulation, we've got to come up with some way of agreeing as a community on what is or isn't acceptable. Otherwise, anybody can decide on whatever they want, and the rest of us have to just sit there and accept it. And like I said, SUPS is requiring this now. There may be more program committees that will be requiring this in the future. There may even be requirements through some of the funding agencies. So it's something that we at least need to start discussing a little bit more thoroughly at this point. So with that, this paper will be published in IEEE Security and Privacy at some point in the future. There's a pre-publication draft that's available if you want to look at that.
So Dave, do you know why SUPS went to requiring the ethics statement? Did something bad happen?
The question is, why did SUPS make this choice? I do not know, but I do know that I was at SUPS last year and there was a panel. I was representing the University of Washington's IRB, the implications of cloud computing and crowdsourcing for research. And there were some pretty heated discussions, and the same thing. How many people have taken their work to an IRB? And very few people had. And there were some discussions among people in the audience is, well, what I'm doing here is totally fine. And others saying, no, what you're doing is not fine. And there was another paper that had some controversy. So it's been an issue that they've been paying attention to for a while, and for whatever reason they decided, yes, we're going to go out and make this requirement. I've been at other conferences though.
Responsibility, not the conference's responsibility, because the conference doesn't run the IRB at an institution, so at the end state, they still have no control.
They don't, but I've been at other conferences where very controversial things have come up, where there have been panels on ethics, and there are very heated discussions, and then nothing happens. But within those same program committees, they've grappled with these issues, and in some cases rejected papers, and have fought among themselves, basically, what do we do about this? Like, this person had no idea. They went and did this research, they came to us, we told them no with the paper. Then sometimes the paper will get shopped to another conference and may get accepted in another one. So there is a lot of discussion going on, sort of behind closed doors. How do we deal with this? Because the people whose papers are being rejected are getting angry. The program committees are having very heated discussions and are sort of dividing some of them. And there have been many instances where research that's been done, as soon as it gets published, all of a sudden there's pushback to the institutions. Did this go through IRB review? How did you decide this? And the researchers themselves, in some cases, have said, well, no, this is not considered human subjects.
Actually, a counterpoint to Ron's statement, I think one of the reasons you might claim is that in a number of academic institutions, the IRB board consists of individuals that don't have the expertise, especially in this particular area,
Right.
almost exclusively,
Right.
to really validly judge the risk. And so basically they're often, here's the stamp, here you go.
Yeah.
So that may be one reason why the conferences may be doing that.
I've got a question. Whenever I think about this ethics topic, I see a little dilemma, and maybe you can briefly comment on that, which is, I mean, you said the ethical, there is no universal ethical standard, and I think I would go even further and say that every individual has their own ethical standard, and that means that you might find yourself in a situation where your own ethical standards are not compliant with, say, the Honeynet project, bylaws, your company's code of conduct, law, whatever. How do you solve that?
All right, so if everybody did not hear that, the question was, everybody sort of has their own ethical standards. If there is no universal set of standards that we should adhere to, how do you make decisions? And if your choice differs from your group and you decide to go forward, how do you deal with that? That is a very thorny issue. The crux issue that I see is the effect. And if people start talking about what is their intent for doing certain things, you'll find that if we go down the road of every individual has the right to choose what they do to every computer on the internet, we get into a very, very dangerous place where you really can't trust anything. So the bad guys are bad enough. Now the good guys potentially are going to cause as much harm as the bad guys. So there are some steps that we can take. I don't think we're going to be able to just come up with a universal set of rules. But I think a universal, not universal, a acceptable within the community, define the community as Honeynet researchers, define it as computer security researchers in general. How should we have these discussions in a way that we can come up with more consistent answers about the choices we make? And I think we can make little steps towards that by starting to look at doing stakeholder analysis, making statements. I was told by someone in a workshop in Canada recently, there's a thing called a research warrant. Has anybody ever written a research warrant? I had never heard of this term. For some research that is potentially really pushing the boundaries, and tenured faculty often are told, your job is to go out and push the boundaries. We don't have progress. Frank Zappa, without deviation from the norm, there is no progress. So you make a statement, this research warrant is, I am doing this research for this particular reason. Your university accepts this, and then if your research, once published, causes the public to say, hey, this person did something totally illegal, we think that this is wrong. It's not a get out of jail free card, but the institution says, we're standing by this person. We believe that they have made a reasoned statement about their intent and how they've decided to protect the acts that they're taking. What's that?
I want one of those.
You want one of those? It appears to be very little used, and it may be because it tends to be things that are illegal. And so people are risk averse. They don't want to do things that are illegal and publish about it. What we're doing, because the laws themselves are sometimes gray or sometimes are explicitly saying, if you do this act, you have broken the law. And that act may be something that we all agree, oh, well, anybody can do that. So is it right to break the law because it's technically possible and anybody can do it? And then all of a sudden we start saying, well, we can just break any law we want. So does that sort of answer your question?
Well, I have a number of follow-up questions.
That's for wine, red wine. Want to switch now? I can answer one while we're switching the computer.